This podcast is sponsored by Oran Cloud Financial Advisor. Oran is a regulated wealth manager and financial planner based in the UK.
One of the best things that you can do, especially from a young age, is to gain a better understanding of your personal finance and investments, including things like saving tax, pensions, using stock markets for potential growth, and more.
You may usually switch off when you hear people talking about money, but the best thing you can do for yourself is to reach out and learn more about good financial management.
We know firsthand that this information is not complex, nor is it hard to grasp. It costs nothing to reach out to Oran, book a face-to-face or virtual appointment with him, and understand more about what you want from your money.
This podcast is also sponsored by 4Gears Marketing Agency. Whether you're seeking to establish a better online presence, increase your sales, or connect with your audience in a more meaningful way, partner with 4Gears today, reach out to them and see how they can take your brand or business to the next level. This episode does deal with subjects around drug and alcohol abuse. For any help that you need, you can find helpful links in the description of this podcast. How's it going, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Here's the Crack podcast. We are joined today by Gary Rutherford. How are you?
I am great, guys. Can I just say thank you for sending me the plane ticket from Derry to Belfast?
No bother.
It's nice to be here.
Did you try and get any meetings in today? Or
Do you know what? I had a creative day, so I have a couple of speaking things happening. So I actually used the time to just think, and it was really nice for a change to not be running about at 100 miles an hour. So thank you.
No problem. But thank you so much for coming on. You're the founder of Arc Fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you want to just, before we sort of jump into it, if you want to give people a bit of an insight into who you are and what Arc Fitness is.
Sure. So my name is Gary Rutherford. I suppose, I'm a registered mental health nurse, addiction nurse therapist, and I'm the founder of a not-for-profit addiction recovery organisation based in the northwest of Ireland. So we're based in Derry, Londonderry. And what we do is we support individuals, family members and the wider community who are struggling with substance use disorders or addiction. We're unique in the fact that we use a really health-focused model. So we use a fitness-based model to help and support people. So we offer a very different approach to people who are struggling with addiction. It's my passion. We've been doing it now for 5 years. We do a lot of work within our communities and also wider within the communities in terms of just how we see people, how we treat people, how we talk to people, but also how we support people who struggle with addiction. Yeah. And we've created these wonderful communities of people in recovery, visible, which is really important. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. People who are, not ashamed to be in recovery, not ashamed to have admitted that they've had a problem for whatever reason and they're doing something about it. So we've been doing that now for kind of 5 years within ARC, and I've always been kind of that advocate, I suppose, for recovery myself.
Yep. And to touch on that, I think it's important for us. Obviously, we'll chat about ARC and your services later on, and
Sure.
obviously
Sure.
the actual topic of addiction and how we can approach it and shed more light on that. And I think one of the key things that really stood out to us whenever we were looking for someone to speak on this is, obviously you're a registered mental health nurse. You've also been on a journey and struggle with addiction, and you've kind of been through that. You have your own story yourself. So I think if you're happy enough, we'll maybe go back and have a bit of chat about that in terms of your experience with it. So I suppose the first thing is kind of going back to the beginning. Like, whenever you look back at your story, where did it kind of start?
So, if we were to go right back, and it's really funny because whenever we think about addiction, we think of these big traumatic life experiences that people face and stuff like that. I grew up in Derry, Londonderry. I had great family. My parents had a great work ethic, loving home. I was just a really anxious, nervous child. I was, for whatever reason, I was terrified of the world. I was really kind of fearful of things. I had a family member that worked way back in the security forces. We had to check cars, all that sort of stuff kind of fed into that anxiety. So I was always an anxious kid. Now, I'm a personal trainer at the minute, but I wasn't always 6'2". I used to be quite small and quite heavy, and I was bullied at school. And I remember that having this really profound impact on me. And I was never a talker. I wouldn't have talked about some of the stuff that was maybe going on in my life. And it wasn't until I got off the school bus and my mother picked me up from school, and I was all red because I had my head beat off a window from the school to the bus stop. And it all kind of came out then. So the bullying incident really kind of was a pivotal point for me, I think, because I felt I was different and I was a bit broken, and maybe there was something wrong with me, because why are they not doing it to other people?
Yeah.
They're clearly doing it to me. So a large part of my early substance use was about acceptance, was about fitting in, but it also, like, I found at a really young age that it quelled that anxiety and that fear, and I realised that whenever I took a drink or whenever I had access to a drug, I felt completely different. And that immediate attachment, that immediate relief was something that stayed with me for quite some time. So I remember that instance at school. I was in a school in Derry, and this all kind of blew up about the bullying, and my parents weren't happy that it was being resolved. So they took me out of that school and they put me in a school in another town, which was like far away from wherever I lived. And I remember thinking, right, this isn't happening again. And I went the other way. As soon as I got into that school, I was problematic. I was chaotic. I remember the first day headbutting somebody, because I thought I need to make a mark here so nobody comes after me, because I had this protection thing that I felt that I really needed to have. And I was just a chaotic child then. And again, parents were always really good, but drugs and alcohol were this thing that I just chased because of the feeling, because of the relief that it gave me.
What sort of age did that all start with, the drugs and alcohol? Was it at a young age?
13, give or take 13. You know, like my first drink would have been young. I mean, my parents were liberal. Here, try this and stuff like that.
Yeah.
None of this is their fault, you know, but that was just their thinking. And I remember smoking cannabis at 13 and having it hidden under my bed. And I always chased after drugs and alcohol. So I always found a way to be around it. So at 14, I was working in a bar collecting glasses in the evenings while I was still at school. And I can remember coming home like 2 o'clock in the morning after collecting glasses with like a bottle of Newcastle brown ale. Don't know why I remember that, but that's what it was. And 10 fags in my pocket at 14. And I started creating this kind of sense of like, this is what I need to do. This is part of my identity. And I always sought out relationships with older people. So I always looked at older peer groups. And I think part of that was one, that need to be accepted by people, but then also for like protection. Because I was really still afraid, you know, I had been beaten up a few times. I used to walk around and be like, wee screwdrivers and spanners and stuff in my pockets. Just like I was afraid of so much. And then obviously that led me to get into things that, you know, I didn't really want to be doing, and I was doing things for that acceptance piece. But that relationship with drugs and alcohol just grew and grew and grew. And as I progressed, I suppose the drugs became harder, the landscape changed. So I went from cannabis, the tablets, ease were around at that time, you know, it was part of the drug scene. Alcohol was always the one, like alcohol was always the one thing that I protected the most. And then I went to the school wouldn't let me. There was one instance in school, like, you know, like this is even from that young age in secondary school. So I got suspended for being drunk in school. They tried to catch me for drug use, but they never caught me with the stuff. But anyway, and I remember me and a friend of mine thought it would be a great idea just to change our ties, our school ties, because we were wearing white shirts, and we went down to an off license and we got served. We thought, well, this is great. And then we also thought it would be a great idea to go back to school, and we did. And he slipped, fell in the toilet, and knocked himself out. I left him in the toilet and went up to a physics class, and you can imagine what went on. So that was the sort of behaviours that I was kind of displaying even at a young age.
Was that sort of a turning point too, that sort of first like access to going into the off license, getting served yourself? There was no reliance on anyone else at that stage. Was that a...
See, your social milestones. Like I'm a bit older now, so I don't know what social milestones really are for people now. But for me, it was, you're old enough to, one, get people to get you alcohol.
Yeah.
Then you were able to get alcohol on an off license. And then if you were lucky enough, you got into a bar. And then it was, and the nightclub, so it was Kelly's at that time. So it was Kelly's and Portrush was the big thing, and Tracks and all these things. So your social milestones were based on where you could go.
Yeah.
And that was almost, that determined your level of acceptance, I think. So that was the thing. But like, I was working in bars, I always found ways to be near alcohol and shops that sold alcohol. So it was problematic from a young age. But the thing about alcohol use as well is, you can tend to mask it for a long time. You know, you can be a problematic substance user and actually mask it for a long time. The first conversation I had about being alcohol dependent was 17.
Yeah.
And we'll go on, they talk. I didn't get sober until I was 30. So there was a lot of time under the bridge. And I remember that conversation, and a guy at the time telling me, you need to wise up. And I'm like, what do you know? Like, I'm struggling, but it'll be okay. and I never really did. And then I had gone to the tech in Limavady, and they stupidly give us out your ID card to fill in yourself. So clearly I changed the date, because I mean, why would you do that? And then I was able to drink during the day. So I was able to go to tech and just be like, nah, I'm just going to go to the bar. There's a bar that sold beer for £1 and you played pool all day. And then I was starting to daytime drinking, things like that. And then we got on with a really nice group of friends. They were from Oma. And they would have came up and stayed during the week and studied. I was doing sports studies at the time. Now, this is funny, right? Because although I'm a personal trainer, I was never fit. I actually tried to do engineering, never knew what I wanted to do. And I lasted 2 weeks and I was going through the prospectus. Like, what can I do that's going to be really easy? Clearly sports studies, because all you must do is play football. So I went on to do sports studies. So I met this really good group of people, you know. And then around that kind of time, it's funny to even talk about. So the weekend that the ball went off in Oma, in 98, I was in Oma the weekend. So we were all there as a group of friends. And we were there at the weekend. And on the Saturday, we'd been in town and I had gotten a bus at the bus depot and the bomb went off and I was in Newton Stewart, which is 10 minutes away from Oma. So we lost a friend. So, you know, I was starting to get disillusioned with here and I was starting to have an inability to deal with feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
Because the drugs and the alcohol really stop you learning to cope with things. So stress, couldn't cope with; grief, couldn't cope with; fear, definitely couldn't cope with. And I just started to see all this stuff, and I was like, something has to change, or I have to do something. And then I made the decision then to leave. They leave Northern Ireland, and all my friends have been filling out UCAS forms to go to university, and my head just wasn't there. And I thought, well, do you know what? Maybe I'll have a wee look at it. So I didn't even get into university. I applied to a college in Scotland, in Aberdeen, to do business studies. Completely different thing again, always trying to reinvent myself. And went to Scotland, and that was a different part of the journey. But I used to collect these wee traumas all along, because I used to make really bad decisions and find myself in really difficult situations.
Would you say you did the travelling just to get away from what was going on in Northern Ireland at that time, or what was sort of the reason?
Look, I hated politics. I hated that. Like, so we grew up just at the Good Friday Agreement had all been set and stuff like that. And I don't try to dwell on it too much, but it fostered the culture that I grew up on. Yeah. And I hated it. Yeah. You know, like, we went to a controlled primary school. You know, we grew up in a Protestant area. But my parents were really forward thinking, and we moved a lot. You know, when we were around, we were exposed to different religions, which was really good. But I hated that culture that was still there. And a lot of my partying and all that sort of stuff would have been done in the city side of Derry, in a completely different culture with a completely different group of friends. Yeah. And for me, that was great. And I didn't see this issue. And then all that stuff, and I was like, right, let's go. Something needs to change. So the Aberdeen was the option. But
just before we go on to like Aberdeen and stuff, just like during those teenage years, like, how frequent actually was the drinking side of it? Like, I know you're saying about going into school drinking and stuff, but like, was it like every day on the drink, like, or?
So it's the typical progression. It starts off at your weekends. There's a few reasons for that, because obviously we things like school responsibilities and finances. Yeah, it's just to save your dinner money during the week. You didn't eat. You may got a bag of Monster Munch during the day, or that was your lunch. You saved your money so you could spend it and stuff. And then I started to progress whenever I could get away with the Wednesday night. Say I was working and was able to work now on a Wednesday, and then there was tech, so now it was daytime drinking, you know, and the progression was always there. I got a job in a bar. Every time I was working, I was drinking. I was hiding vodka and mixers, so people wouldn't know. Any opportunity that I had access to it, I thought, well, there's clearly a reason to do it, you know, and that was that pull. And like, that psychological draw to alcohol was so strong from that young age, because of I remember the relief that it gave me. I remember the first time I stayed out and lied and said I was staying somewhere, and we got cheap cider, and I remember, and you're always trying to emulate that feeling. So it progressed, and I remember I would sit in my room. My mum and dad would be in the house, and I would just be in my room drinking like bottles of red wine, 16, 17, 18, big bottles of cider in the fridge, and and I would have fought about it with my parents, because they knew, they were always trying to they navigate it and stuff like that. But like, I lived in a bungalow. Whenever I had the opportunity, the bedroom door would close and I'd be out the window. I'd be away, you know, so...
But you'd say that is normal behaviour, like, for any child around that age, that they do want to go out drinking at the weekend, you know, sneaking out as part of the fun of it and that. But like, where do you think it got too far? Obviously, you're saying about the drinking in the bedroom and stuff.
It got too far whenever I decided that I could do it at any time. Yeah. When there was no rules and there was no regulations.
Was there no fear at that point? You know, like, I know myself, like when I was younger, would have snuck out and had a drink or whatever, but like I would never, like, would been afraid to go home being drunk and stuff. Was that never a fear at that time?
At the earlier stages, so I was a DJ for a while, and I say that loosely, right? DJ Supreme, surprise, if you ever want to.
DJ what?
Supreme. Just throw that out.
Nice.
That's old school there. That was well buried, right?
I think we could bring that back.
DJ, yeah. Friend of Michael, DJ Bass Boy.
I know a boy who's having a wedding in August.
There you go. I can play the best mega mixes you ever heard. And you know, and I was in social clubs from a young age. So while I was at school, I would have DJ'd at a social club, and it might have been during the week. And I remember going to one, and they made a bucket of punch. For whatever reason, it was in this bar. It was like the upstairs, downstairs, it was called. And I was DJing, and they had a phone my father to come and get me, to take me home as the DJ all the night, because it was just a mess. And I used to get in that situation a lot, you know. Yeah. And my parents tried to curtail it, and they just couldn't. I was sneaky, like. I was sly. I would have found ways to get around it. The drug use, for example, you know, that wasn't on their radar for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, but as I said, like, and I think for me, and we'll touch on a bit more about the reasons why people do it. So I always talk about people using substances for different reasons. There's usually four. So one is to feel good, because whenever you actually take a drink or a drug, floods your brain, your neuroreceptors are flying. It feels good, so you can understand why people do. But the second one is they feel better. That's the dangerous one. Mm-hmm. If you're using alcohol to change your feelings, if you're using alcohol or drugs to make you feel not anxious, not sad, and you're not having to learn to do that yourself, then you run that risk of the reliance, and that's really difficult. The other one is they do better. So people who think they're using coke and amphetamines to stay up longer or do things better, this illusion, or steroids, for example, in the gym. And then the other one is that social pressure.
Yeah.
For me, I felt there was a lot of social pressures because I had created this identity of me that I had to be the last one that left. I had to be the drunkest. I had to be the one that took it all, because that would make me accepted by people. And that was really my downfall for like a long time. It's still probably something that I struggle with now. But it got me into some really difficult places. And like, again, you know, and I talk about this on occasion and not too often. And like, I found myself, so I was sexually assaulted by a man at 18 because of how incapacitated I got myself with drugs and alcohol. Now, I know that that's not my fault, but that was the sort of stuff that was beginning to happen as a result of my drug and alcohol use. But then you imagine, as an 18-year-old man, something like that happening, what do you do with that? I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to talk about this thing. So I left and I went to Scotland. Yeah. And I took all of the shit, all of the baggage, all of the pain, all of the anger, just to a brand new place. And it was just, that's when it really stepped up. Yeah. You know, it was bad I was bad at home. I was kind of navigating it okay. But when I got to Scotland, the lid changed. Like.
So would you say the alcohol and drug use sort of went from you just trying to be like this, to take you out of your comfort zone, but then it became sort of to block everything out? I think people try to reinvent themselves a lot. Whenever people go away to different places, they think, no, they get the opportunity. Yeah. I went away, no supervision. It's like going to uni, no supervision. Yeah. Nobody to answer to. I didn't have to answer my phone if anybody phoned me. And I remember going to halls of residence, and there was a shop around the corner, and I was just drinking every day. I wasn't there one night, and I found somebody to buy weed from. That started that process. So I was starting to build the connections. And then I thought, I still have the fear. I still have, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to access the things that I need? So I got a job as a doorman. Yeah. I wasn't a fighter, but like, I started to get around those people that I had done before that were going to protect me and stuff like that. And then the drug use got harder, and the access to drugs kind of changed and stuff like that. I tried to maintain uni, repeated the college twice, eventually finished that by God's grace. I don't know how. And then got into the back door of a university. So, you know, I really struggled through. But I remember going to buy a bag of grass one night. And I like to think I'm smart enough. I like to think I know the dangers of drug use. So you kind of think, ecstasy tablets, bit of speed, that's okay. Alcohol, that's okay. Heroin, yeah, no. I've seen train spotting, definitely not. I went up one night, and it was a Friday night, and I went to buy a bag of grass, and there was a guy smoking heroin, and he said, do you want to smoke of this? And I said, yes. And it was just like that. It wasn't like, oh, could I not? And I had realised that the switch had broken. And I think,
Do you remember whenever people used to talk about, oh, there's gateway drugs?
Yeah.
It's less about gateway drugs and more about your risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you become a little bit more open to trying things at that stage. And then I started smoking heroin. I was using grass. I was drinking. I was trying to maintain a relationship and failing pretty miserably. All the relationships around me were falling apart. I had my first suicide attempt in Scotland. And again, an impulsive event was off the back of a massive argument that was drug and alcohol fueled. And it was just a really difficult time. My partner at the time, put up with a lot.
Yeah.
But what happened was the spotlight was on me, so I had to kind of hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, and you'll see anybody who struggles with addiction becomes very good at manipulating and hiding and getting their way to do things and stuff like that. So I managed to hone that craft of manipulation really well. Or so I thought. But it was really challenging. And then again, opportunity to reinvent. So went from Aberdeen down to a place called Dumfries, which is a bit like going from Belfast to Moy, if you've ever been to. So it's a little bit different, right? No access to drugs, didn't know anybody, started drinking again, trying to get a little bit fit and stuff at the time, and just going around in this rabbit wheel of trying to get well for maybe I might get about a week or two sober and then fall back off the wagon, and there would be more arguments. And
was that your intention whenever you were moving to these other places?
No,
to get away from the
we went
drugs and
because my
stuff?
partner at the time was studying, and there was a placement year to do. So the placement year happened to be in Dumfries. So I thought, look, it's a great opportunity. Let's go down and hopefully things will be different.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did that year and moved back to Aberdeen again. But I could never curtail the drinking. I could sporadically manage the drug stuff.
Yeah.
I could do periods of time off that, but whatever the thing about the alcohol was, it was just so strong. Like,
In terms of obviously where you were at in that journey, you hear a lot of people talking about it. Like they'll go out on a night out and they'll get absolutely blackout drunk.
Yeah.
And they wake up the next morning, they say never again. And some people do never again and some people don't. And was there any of them stages, like, with your suicide attempt, or even what you were saying about, the assault stuff, like, was there ever any stage where after that you did sort of assess the situation and relate it to drug or alcohol abuse and go no more and try to get clean? Or
so like you speak to anybody struggling with addiction, right? And every day is an assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
I knew that what I was doing wasn't really what normal people, I'd imagine, are doing. And like, so you risk assess all the time. You look at yourself all the time. You know what you're doing, but like whenever you have a dependency issue, or whether your relationship with it is so strong, you'll always find a way to rationalize that out. And I did that like so many times. But also, like this, from a science perspective, right? The younger you start using drugs, the more damage you do to your brain. Your prefrontal cortex at the front of your brain is like your braking system. Your decision making, your environmental risk assessment. So like I started at 13, it doesn't fully develop until you're 25. So I started damaging the braking system and the risk assessment of the brain really early. Now the good thing about the brain, it's malleable and it can change over time, hence why people can and do get sober and change their life. But there was loads of times, and I'm going back to what you were saying, did I ever wake up after a blackout and think never again? 100%. But a lot of those times I was drinking within an hour because it felt sick and it felt awful. Yeah. And that maybe I was an avoidance of that. I don't like pain and discomfort. So, like I was the guy that got up early at the party when everybody else had, are still kind of sleeping, because all the drink was still downstairs and nobody would know or suspect, because if they smelled drink off me, because clearly it was from the night before, and that was a cycle.
So you'd start drinking again the next morning?
And so they call it the cure. If you want to call it the cure, people called it the cure. And yes, of course, it does make you feel a little bit better because you're imbibing alcohol again. But for me, like it was about, if I drank on a Friday, I'd have to drink on a Saturday because I would justify myself. Oh, you feel awful, you'll feel better. Yeah. And then it's funny. There's not a point. And I think anybody who struggles with addiction, doesn't go to bed and think, see, tomorrow can't wait until I have to drink every day because I'm going to be, it's going to be great crack. There's some point where it just meshes and then you're stuck. Yeah. And that's where I found myself really stuck. And now there was times where maybe something would happen, like an argument would happen. I was like, shit, I need to pull this back now. Okay, pull this back now and maybe get a day visibly okay. But the second I had an opportunity, I'd be drinking at lunchtime, or I'd be trying to find a way to take the age off it.
How did you manage like the likes of university and work and like even like relationships with people? Like, was it not?
It was extremely difficult. I'm a very adaptable. I realise this now that I'm sober and I'm older. I'm very adaptable, and I was extremely manipulative and cunning. So I'd have been exhausted from thinking about all of the ways that I could do what I needed to do. So it was such a preoccupying thing. Studying, I got by. Like, I didn't come out with a glowing degree. Do you know what I mean? I got by doing as much as I could. But it was exhausting. Because you're constantly having to be one step ahead all the time. So, your week had to be planned. Like, there was a lot of opportunistic stuff. So, if my partner at the time was going to say, I'm going here for now, you're like, right, I have an hour to go out and get this and do this. And then, so you're on all the time. So it's exhausting. So most people who struggle with addiction just get burnt out because they're just exhausted. And that's how it was for a long time. And then we made the decision to move again. And we moved to Dublin this time. So I had finished college. My partner at the time had finished her degree, and we moved to Tala in Dublin. So Tala wouldn't be the nicest part of Dublin, but we went there.
Yeah.
And I was working for Dunn Stores as an HR manager, and well, they can't come after me now anyways, too long. But like I would have struggled with daytime drinking.
Yeah.
Because I could get away with it. Because my wife was working in a pharmacy, but that started to spill back into life again. It started to cause problems in the relationship. And again, you were promising the world, the sun and the stars, that things are going to be different. I didn't know anybody in Dublin, couldn't buy drugs, and I didn't have the means or the capacity. So it was alcohol again, back to the old faithful. And then we must have lasted Dublin for a year. We decided to move to Tralee, to in County Kerry. Very different part of the world, very different experience in the world, very isolating for me, because I was far away from, even though I had disconnected from a lot of people, I was still really far away. And got a job managing supermarkets. Like, I could talk. I'm all right at talking, and I could talk my way into situations. Like, if I went in for an interview, I'd be well prepared and almost kind of smooth my way through it. And I got a job then managing supermarkets. But that opportunistic drinking was always there. Any time there was an opportunity, I was like, right, how can I get a drink today? How can I do this? How can I do that? And there was one instance when my partner at that time I drove her to Cork Airport because she was going away to go on a training course. And I literally couldn't get her to the airport fast enough because I was like, right, I'm going back. I'm going to the off license. I'm buying this. I'm going to sit in the house and I'm just going to drink. Like, right, that's what I did. And I drank all through the night. Must have slept for about an hour. And I was driving to work the next morning, and I tried to overtake a flatbed truck on a back road, and I wrecked the car. The car flipped. I broke my back, nearly severed the spine. And that was the start of the progression of the downfall. So it started to become visible now. So when I was trying to hide, now although my partner knew the difficulties, I was hiding it from everybody. And I was put in a metal frame, a hyperextension brace, and they put me in a single bed on me downstairs, and they prescribed me tramadol. Like, Jesus, of all things, right? They prescribed me a powerful opiate pain medication. So I was taking tramadol, and sure, I was loving life because it was great. I was just bombed all day. And then I remember they gave me one crutch. I don't know why. Maybe it was because of the system in the south. Maybe it was going to cost more to give me two crutches. So they give me one.
One's free.
So whenever I got mobile, there was a shop around the corner. So in the morning, I would say me goodbyes when I go out to work because obviously I was off. Take my tramadol and be like, oh, here we go, and hobble to the shop around the corner and start to buy bottles of wine. So I used to drink during the day, take my tablets and stuff, and then attempt to try and sober up. And that went on for a couple of months to the point when it was time for me to go back to work. I was back in that state where I couldn't stop again. Yep. So I was going back to work. I was drinking at lunchtime. I was doing all those things, and it just started to really take its toll on my mental health. Again, hiding it was getting harder. We had I had access to the medications at that time because of the profession that my partner was in at the time, and I was stealing them and hiding them around the house and things like. So I started using diazepam a lot then. Mm-hmm. So the tramadol was there, and I used to get myself in the tramadol to a point where I would take them so much I couldn't eat, and I would vomit first thing in the morning, and I would say, right, that's it. And then I would be so sick come the rest of the day. So then I started taking diazepam. So I thought this is clearly going to kind of balance it out. And like I remember there was one instance when my partner came back, God help her, and she came back, and I was laying at the bottom of the stairs. I had drank a bottle of wine, I had taken a load of tablets and fallen down the stairs, and we had a Glade plug-in at the bottom of the stairs, and I cracked my face, my eye in the Glade plug-in, and I was just in a pool of blood in the bottom of the floor. And that was the sort of states I was finding myself in then. Managed to pull it together at some level and got another job in another supermarket, because again, this was going to reinvent myself again. And this was in Limerick. So there was a travel and there was either a commute, but you could stay up there in a hotel if you were doing shifts. I was like, well, clearly that's going to be beneficial. Stop off, bags of grass, that'll do me now when I'm up here drinking as much as possible. And again, I got so sick. And I remember my mental health deteriorating at that stage, because obviously it wasn't great anyway. All the stuff was starting to happen. People were starting to see through the facade that I had tried to hold up, because I was starting to slip. It wasn't working anymore. And I had made the decision, things had gotten too much. There was another argument, and I decided that was it. That was a decision that I was going to end my life. So I got my car, bombed with a bottle of wine and a load of tablets, and I drove to a beach down in Tralee. Beautiful place. And I was in the front, and the plan at the time was, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go for a swim, and that's it. Blah, blah, blah. Life's going to be. So that's it then. And I was in the car, and I got a knock on the window, and a woman says, "You've got a flat tyre." Now, I was drinking in the car in the time, so eventually I just broke the train of thought. And I either, because of my intoxication, failed to change the tyre correctly, or I intentionally, because the memory's not good, drove into a wall on the way back from the beach. So it changed my mind. It was whatever was happening. And I lost my finger, I lost my thumb, broke ribs, everything was a mess. Back in the hospital, fighting with paramedics. It just so happened that I was a nurse in the car behind me. And again, it all now erupted again. Now, it was all visible again. You know, the police took blood, couldn't hide the fact that I was over the limit, just had got a new car, lost the insurance, everything. Life just folded.
I suppose just like to stop you there, like just like from all the stuff you've said, I can't help but think like you went to uni, you got decent jobs, like from the outside looking in, like you wouldn't have thought. Do you know what I mean? Like I just think like it's back to like we sort of touched on it before the podcast, like misconceptions, like from what you're saying, really, like if you didn't really know you're coming and you have a good job. You're drinking on the weekends like most people do. Do you know, like it doesn't seem that out of the ordinary, but it's just back to like, it's almost like the hiding it, like.
And it's really important to think, when we think of addiction, we tend to have a stereotypical idea of what addiction looks like. So it's either somebody who, for some unfortunate reason, is on the street, or they're in a rehabilitation centre. Substance use disorder is a spectrum. There's two ends. There's mild and there's severe. And people sit on that, and they fluctuate through different points at different times. So we work with for example, people who are professionals, who have got professional jobs, that things are now starting to spill out with people who have never worked a day in their life. There's people who have got all this difficult stuff happened. But the reality is, when we talk about substance use disorder, we need to remember that it's very different. And it's about, when we talk about addiction, and so this is why I have real issues about labels like alcoholic and addict and stuff like that. It's something that we work really hard not to use. Because the second you call somebody, or you tell somebody that they're an addict or they're an alcoholic, then they identify as this negative thing, which is really difficult to identify as. So why would, I'm not that. So immediately the back is up. So we work with people to look at their relationship with substances, because we all understand relationship. We've either had one, good, bad, or it fluctuates. So we try to work about working with people within that spectrum of substance use disorder. But a lot of people manage this for long periods of time. Some people manage it, nobody ever does anything about it, and what does give it away is their health declines. Yeah. You know, so their liver will fail, they'll have liver damage, or cirrhosis of the liver, or they'll stroke, heart attacks, all that kind of stuff. And then some people, it just monumentally spills out, you know, or something happens. And then unfortunately, we see people more and more now passing away and dying, more young people, more people who are using sporadically, you know, because of the landscape of drug use. So I think it's important, the point is, you can never assume that somebody is as bad as you think they are. You never know what's going on in someone's house. You know, we do a lot of work with families. So it was one of the nicest things that we set up with ARC was the family support groups. And, you know, these guys are trying to cocoon that in so nobody knows about it. They're trying to protect and look after everybody. And sometimes people never really fully see because people hide it a lot. And I'm pretty sure my partner at that time was embarrassed.
Yeah.
So it would have helped with the protection
Mhm.
part of that as well. So people didn't see, until it was, you couldn't hide it, until it was just right flat bang in front of you. Like.
But do you think, like, obviously you're working as a manager in a shop, you're working with a lot of people who see you day in, day out. Do you think they didn't sort of have an idea and maybe were too afraid to say something or didn't know what to say?
Yeah. So the arrogance in me says, who is going to suspect somebody like you doing this during the day? Who?
Do you knew, even you in your head, that this is crazy? Like, but,
Aye. So, like, who would think? I wouldn't think that that's what that person's naturally. I wouldn't think that they're going on their lunch break. They drink a half bottle of vodka to come back and work again. Because so it was almost like hiding in plain sight.
yeah.
But I thought, yes, sure, nobody's going to find out. But until somebody does find out, there's only so many times you can go to McDonald's, weigh a half bottle, and get some Coke and a drive-through, drink it, and then go to work, glary-eyed before somebody starts to pick it up.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that rationale thing. So I could justify drinking vodka in the morning. In my mind, I could. I could tell myself, nobody's going to think that you were doing that. Sure, go on ahead, fill your boots. I remember studying. It was whenever I had changed one of the jobs, I had thought it would be a great, and I don't ask me why, a great idea to become a pharmacist. I'm glad that didn't play out, right? So I went back to doing my leaving cert chemistry. And had tutors and all that sort of stuff, and I remember going to the library. I would have drank in the library while I was studying, because who's going to suspect that you're in the library with a Coke bottle that's half full of vodka? Like, nobody's going to think that. And then I remember going to sit the leaving cert exam, and it was in a college, and I drank a quarter bottle of vodka in the toilet and put it in the cistern. Before I sat down, they set the leaving cert chemistry. So like I would try and I thought I was smart. I thought I could do it and get away with it. And I think what happens is a lot of people do it to the point where it just stops working.
Yeah.
They lose control of it completely. And then everybody sees it, and that's a really difficult place to end to be.
Do you think it would have been a help if someone had sort of pointed it out during that sort of, like, say, when you were working in the shop, if someone had came to you and said, look, we know what you're doing, would it have given you a moment of realisation, or do you think the back would have been up again? And
I think what drives people to sort themselves out is a build-up of consequences. So, and we see it a lot with addiction and addiction services, when people force people, like, you have to go and sort yourself out, and maybe they protected you and there's been no consequences. Like, it took me, like, I haven't even got to where I even got sober yet. It took me so many things. There had to be so many consequences. So maybe back then, if something had have happened, then that would have been a consequence.
yeah.
And I think the more of these consequences that you face, I think the more you realise, because if you never face consequences, why change? And that's the biggest thing when it comes to the people who are struggling with addiction. If they are not facing any consequences, if they're being protected, if they're financially given resources and all that sort of stuff, and they never face the consequences of what they're doing, then why change? Why do that?
Yeah. For like someone is experiencing someone else doing that they are working with, what do you think the best approach is to maybe be sensitive towards that person that does have that issue, but like, what do you think the best way for them to approach that is?
So the family support, so we run family support groups in ARC. They're 6-week family support groups, and we have a family support worker. So the crux of that is not to give you this magic potion that's going to make you go home and fix Johnny and you're going to sort him out. But if you can change how you communicate, if you can identify enabling behaviours and stop doing them, if you can, stop financially providing for somebody, and feeding a habit, if you start to allow that person to start feeling consequence, then that's a bit uncomfortable for the person. So the idea is, yes, we teach people to look after themselves, so the family member, like, self-care and everything is in there, but also starting to change small things about what you do. Boundaries, for example, like what's acceptable behaviour in your home, what's acceptable behaviour in your relationship. And what happens is you force the consequences on the other person, because as you change as a supporter, people start to think, well, Jesus, maybe I will have a wee look, maybe I will try and do something here, maybe I will ask for a bit of help. So it starts that process of getting a bit of help.
What were like the consequences then? Just to go back to your own story, like what were the consequences for you that really pushed you to like get help yourself? And
so we talked about accidents, we've talked about visits to the hospital, there's criminal convictions, there's been caught. I lost the car. I thought, hey, it would be a good idea. I still need to get about. managed to buy. I like to tell people it was a motorbike. It was a moped, right? But for the purpose of the story, there, guys, it was a motorbike. And I remember being so drunk on it one day. I came to a T junction and just stopped. It was like it was like that scene from Only Fools and Horses. I stopped and just went over and just dislocated my shoulder, compromised my shoulder. But I started drinking while I was on this moped. And I used to go to an Aldi and I used to buy a big 2-litre bottle of Coke and a bottle of vodka and mix it in the car park. And the police sat and watched me one night and did my thing, mixed it up and put it in the wee box and started the moped down the road. And that was a start at the end. They pulled me in. They arrested me. They made me put the moped, it was like half a mile from my house. And I took to the station and all that sort of stuff. And I got home and I went to bed. And the first thing that I thought about in the morning was there's still half a bottle of drink in the box of that thing. Yeah. And I went and I got it. And that same day, she was my wife then at that time, had phoned my father. And he got one of his friends, I think it's his bodyguard at that stage, right? And they came down to Tralee and they threw me into the back of a car with 2 black bags of clothes. And that was the start of life. Just ended. My whole life in Tralee ended that night. And I started that whole process of chaos and recovery back in Derry. And like there was consequences all the way through that. I then got home, a mess. Eventually got into a rehabilitation centre. No intention of wanting to do that for myself. I was going to fix my marriage. I was going to be, I'll just go in, I'll do 4 weeks and it'll be grand. I used right up to the day I was going in. I was so sick. I remember going in there. I was so sick for that first week. And then the 3rd week, they let you out for a weekend. And I went and I bought a bottle of cough mixture and some antihistamines because, I'm not drinking. And, so I wasn't there. And then it just progressed because, it was the first time I was kind of sober. And I've this marriage that has just failed. I know I'm homeless. I've nowhere to go. I'm now in Derry. I have nothing. And I couldn't handle it. Emotionally, couldn't handle it. The drinking got worse. Started using legal highs because I didn't have access to drugs. It was messy. I turned into a really awful person at that stage because it kind of changes your character, unfortunately. The police lifted me from my house. I'd taken a knife to my father. I'd fought with my father. I was taking my mother's Parkinson's medication. I was going to AA and doing all the things that you're not supposed to do. I just wasn't a good person at that stage. But I was really, anyway, it was a really difficult time. But the police pulled me off the bridge in Derry. They put me in the hospital, and I remember it was the Christmas of 2009. Mm-hmm. It was Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and the day after I was in Ward 2 in Galvin on a clinical detox. And you would think that would be enough to make you sort your life out a wee bit. They told me I could phone my parents to come and get me. I made the phone call outside whilst walking to the off licence, which was round the corner, and I drank a half bottle and came back up and sat in the hospital bed after a detox in the hospital. It was just a mess. And that went on for a period of time. And then I bumped into some people and the opportunity to come into a treatment centre in Armagh came up. And I was tired. I was burnt out. I was exhausted. Now I was in my late 20s. I was exhausted. My body was broken. My mind was a mess. And I thought, right, I'll go and I'll give it a go. And that was the start of the recovery process from then, and that was 2009 into 2010. So that Christmas, that period in time was really difficult, because again, I have no coping mechanisms, remember? I don't know, I couldn't deal with a fart in a car, I literally couldn't cope with anything. And then all of a sudden I'm dealing with marriage breakdown, divorce, nowhere to live, finances, no job, all that stuff. So it was a really difficult time. But I think that was the catalyst. I think I realised it was like this is not good. You're nearly 30. Who's going to want you? You're broken. You've got all the shit that you've just brought with you. Something has to change.
Yeah, I suppose your sort of way you described it there was, bumping into a group of people, and the Lifeline kind of came and sort of. I think it was kind of glanced over that there in terms of I think for people listening, looking back at what you've been through, that was a lifeline of after a series of pretty severe blunders. So I suppose that was it then in terms of Because you've obviously said you've been to that rehabilitation side before, and that was kind of like as soon as you could get out and get back at it again was your approach to it. Whereas this time was different because I think it was everybody could have turned around and said you have a problem, but I think you actually admitting it to yourself and going, I'm tired of this was.
I think I was at the stage where I was just burnt out. Like I was a husk or a bit of a shell. You know, I was just, and I didn't know myself. I didn't know anything anymore. And, you know, I think about the people that were around me. Like at that stage, there was my best friend, a guy called Tim Shields. He's how we talk about Tim's a runner. And Tim's also, again, recovery. He's also a pastor. He's many things like. But I remember my mum used to phone him, go and come and talk to Gary. Go and come and help him out. And he hated me at that stage. Like, and he'd adamantly say, like, I didn't even like you at that stage because we used to fight the bad out. And he ended up being the best man at my wedding. You know, that turned around. But I had people like Tim who, you know what, who kind of saw something, you know, had people around me that, and it's funny. So for years I had this perception people saw me as a problematic person.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until, you know, people started to see me as a person with a problem that made it a little bit different. So how people spoke to me, you know, don't get me wrong, people gave me a kick in the arse when I needed it. But, you know, people kind of understood that I had stuff they navigate through. And I went up to Armagh and I spent 3 months in a residential treatment centre. No TV, no radio, no access to the outside world. Must have power hosed for about 2 months amongst therapy and all that sort of stuff. But had a good chance to really have a think about the destruction and all that stuff. You know, not only the stuff that happened to me, but also the shit that I caused other people. Like, you know, and that's the thing about addiction. You know, like I caused hurt to so many people and pain to so many people. And there's people I can apologise to, and there's people I can't. And I have to find my ways to navigate that. But I knew something had to change. So I did my time. So I spent 3 months there. And then I actually relapsed on and off for about 2 years around that time. So, see, recovery, I believe recovery is not a linear process. I don't think you just get sorted, get sober, and that's you.
Mm-hmm.
I think relapse is part of the process. It's part of the process if you learn something from it.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, you know, eventually the relapses got shorter and then I got more distance between them. And then eventually they stopped.
Still progress there.
But there was a lot of learning, so that the work started to be done after that. But again, that was due to the people that were around me and the things that I was involved in.
Yeah. Because that's one of the things that we discussed last night. We're talking about, like, wanted to speak about the whole going into rehab and stuff. Like, a lot of time you hear people going into rehab, they don't go in once, they go back again and again, they maybe sign themselves out of it and stuff like that there. But from someone looking from the outside, you're thinking, oh, that's not working for them. Like, so would you say the opposite, that it is sort of working for them, but it's just over time, it takes longer?
So everybody is different,
yeah.
You know, and it goes back to consequences. So I could never say, you know, you could never say, treatment's not going to work for you. You could never say that because you just don't know. You know, you don't know what you could take. And it's really funny because all it takes is one person, they say one thing that you relate to that changes a little bit of your thinking, that makes you change your decision making.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. I do think now if you're going into residential treatment, you have to want to do it.
Yeah.
If you're being brought there by your spouse, by your parents, by your partner, whatever that is, if they're taking you and telling you have to do it, that's a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Because you have to get to that point yourself. And that's what's so frustrating whenever we work with families. They're like, why can't they just do the thing? We put everything in place. Because they haven't recognised that it's the issue now that they need to change. And that's hard. And that's why it's complex and it's complicated. And there's a lot of different factors. But I think how much opportunity we give people, I think people, especially with addiction, it's really helpful and healthy to be around other people who struggle with addiction, who are in a good place. Because that peer support, that understanding, that empathy and compassion is really important. And you'll find most residential centres are run by people who have had issues themselves.
Yeah.
Which is really good, as well as clinicians, don't get me wrong. So I suppose the ARC stuff was all about how can we use our collective experience of this thing to try and help and support other people. And show them that, you know what, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be different. But also not be ignorant enough to say that it's not going to take a piece of work, like, because it's tough going, man. It's the hardest thing I've had to do. I've been through some shite, and this has been the toughest. Being sober, staying sober, getting through that process has been the toughest. Like,
you see the relapses just after your second stint in rehab.
Yeah.
Like, was there like more of a realization from yourself after that happened of like, fuck, like I really need to get back on track here? Or was it like, did you have a better support network around you? Like, what were the sort of changes when, like you're saying you had a relapse, but then you had a good stint off it and eventually you did stop? Like, what was it after the relapses that made you get back on? Like,
there was a lot of pride in that. So I had good people around me, but there's no point having good people around you if you're not prepared to talk about it. You know, that sort of thing. And again, I had felt that people had been telling me, you're doing really well. And I was like, fuck, I can't tell them that I'm not. I can't say it because now they're going to think badly, or they're going to think that I'm struggling. But it was around the time, you know, the relapse was happening that I met my wife now, Sarah. Sarah's a therapist. And, you know, she always kind of suspected some things were going on. And I suppose her approach to that was, I get that this is happening, but this can't keep happening. So we need to bring some people in. And she did. She told on me. You know, and hey, I love her for it, and obviously it was an uncomfortable conversation, but she recognised that, you know, other people had to start to come in, and then people were in my life, and people were like, you know, they always tell you that if you're struggling, you just reach out, just text and reach out. Like, you might as well be on Mars, right? Yeah. That's how much of a chance I have of texting you. I'm here drinking, like. You know, but I remember there was one guy, Brian, and Brian was like, what I want you to do every single day is text me. I don't care if it's a full stop, if it's a comma, if it's something, just start getting into the habit of texting me every day. And it worked. And I started to becoming a bit more articulate. I started talking a little bit more. I started talking about my feelings. God forbid I ever talked about them. Started talking about that stuff. And that's where the healing came. The healing came from the understanding, dealing with the emotions, the difficult stuff, the distorted thinking, you know, the negative thinking patterns about myself, you know, the no self-worth, self-esteem, none of that stuff. You know, that was the work that had to be done then. Mm-hmm. But I remember it was after my last relapse. I was about 4 weeks after my last relapse, and Tim Shields again, we were a bit better friends at this stage. Being a runner, came round to my flat. He says, come on, we're going to the Foyle Valley Running Club tonight. I'm like, we're what? Well, we're going to the running club tonight. It'll be good for you. He said, right, okay. And like, I would like to think, you know, I would love to tell you I took to it like a duck to water, but I definitely didn't, right? And I wasn't like a flipping gazelle when I got there, right? As you knew yourself as a runner, Ross, you're like a gazelle.
I'm no.
Don't blow his head up.
I'm no gazelle.
And I got there. I was unfit. I was unhealthy, and I was as far from the image of a runner as you can imagine. And I did the session, and it was a tempo session, a fartlek session, and a pyramid session. So the runners will know what that is, aka it's awful, right? Yeah. And I threw up at the end, and I says, lad, I'm never doing that again. What are you doing? And you know what, Tim being Tim, and again being somebody in recovery and somebody who valued the power of physical activity, came back the following week, and you know, with some encouragement and a kick in the hole, I ended up back at the running club, and I did the session, didn't die. It was just a little bit easier than the time before, but that was enough for me to then go back again and go back again and then go back again, and then I started attending regular sessions at this running club, and then my identity started to shift from being an addict, an alcoholic, somebody in recovery, to somebody who focused on their health and liked to run. And I was then surrounded by people within a community who, you know, who didn't view me as an addict or an alcoholic or somebody with an addiction issue. They just saw me as a runner. Yeah. So that helped me regain self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence. I did turn into Forrest Gump for a period of time, because me being me, like, I went from doing zero running to like all the run. I was like, how can I collect all the running today?
You're on 5 marathons in 18 months.
I did. No, yeah, well, yeah, there's 2. So I did that the first time. The second time I did that was in 2001, where I did 5 in 5 days with a weighted vest. So I did it with a tactical weighted vest. That was part of a campaign that we were running. It was the No Shame campaign. That's the public stuff that we do with Dark. And the purpose was to run them.
When was that? Sorry,
2021, the No Shame campaign. So the purpose of the vest was to symbolise the stigma of addiction. Mm-hmm. So running is what we carry. So the weight was to represent the carrying of that. Sounded like an epic task, right? Mm-hmm. Did the training, you know, wore the vest during the training. Did day 1. It was all right. Day 2, I came off the Peace Bridge in Derry, which is kind of springy, and onto the concrete, and I felt the worst pain go through the front of my leg, and had fractured my fibula. And I ran the 5 days. I went to the hospital after I ran the 5 days, and I was in a boot for 18 months. Couldn't run after it. However, had a really good impact for the campaign that we were running. You know, the symbolism was immense. It was probably one of the stupidest things I've ever done, but I mean the results were really good. So for me, running was something that I really loved, and I loved it because it was kind of solitary. You could do a lot of thinking, you could do a lot of processing, but then you could go to a club and be with people as well, you know. But whenever I first got sober, I was running all the time. Like, you'd have seen me just a couple of days or twice a day, sometimes running the bridges in Derry, and then I had to learn some balance because that was important. Because that all or nothing thing's just not a good thing. So the marathons with the weight fest were something.
It's mad though how sport and any sort of exercise can like have such a profound impact on, and I think a lot of people see obviously like influencers and stuff online, and they're encouraging you to go running, and they're like, even obviously I think wearing weighted vests and stuff is obviously like, you were obviously doing that for a reason, but I think it's so like but I also think like, I think people underestimate the impact that it can have. You don't just have to be struggling with addiction, like, but even mental health problems and stuff, like, and just like, I found myself now over the past 18 odd weeks training, it's like the other night you just went out to run because you were like you're so fried from work, and I didn't want to go out to run, I just wanted to go out, plug my headphones in, and that was that. And I think a lot of people don't, even whether that's like, I found that in golf as well, like whenever Tommy first got me into golf, it's like 4 hours where you're out, the phone's in the bag, and then you get back to the car park and you're like, flip, I never looked at my phone that entire time. It was just,
we have a class that it's like meditation and motion. Okay, so like there's loads of different kind of analogies you can use for it. So again, one of the campaigns we ran was motion changes emotion, because the reality is emotion of doing something is better than the emotion of doing nothing. So like, if you've had a really shitty day, if things are getting on top of you, if you get out and you change and you do some movement, then things start to change. But like, physical activity was a game changer for me. Like, you know, I had been the rehabs, I had been the AA, I had been the person-centered treatment, I had been the Christian treatment, I had been the, you know, I had people shouting, I had all of those different types, and this was something that actually I found worked. But I feel that it works, and for me it's really important, is because most people who struggle with addiction has maybe lived in some kind of chaos. Maybe they haven't been physically well, haven't been eating, definitely haven't been sleeping well. And then we put them in treatment and we think, right, we're going to sort you out. They're not ready. It's like, so I think we need to build some sort of foundational piece of work. So like a house has a foundation, I think that recovery needs a physical foundation, a nutritional foundation, before you can start unpacking all that sort of stuff. But like, the health benefits have been there for 42 years in relation to mental health and substance use when it comes to using physical activity to support it. You know, self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, serotonin levels, community, connection, you know, all of the health implications, mobility. Believe it or not, we have a lot of people that come into our program that are on long-term opiate pain medication for issues with their ankles or their knees or their hips. They come in, they start, they move. We have a referral pathway with a local foot and ankle clinic. They get an assessment. Maybe they need an insole, and they come off their medications. So like, there's so many different ways that exercise is beneficial. But for us, we use it in the program, and that was really important. So that was always going to be rooted in physical activity, and we use high impact sessions for the majority of the training, because when you come in the door, and this is why I think that high impact stuff is really important. When you start engaging in like a circuit class or something that's tough, you can't think about anything else. You're just trying to survive. You're just trying to breathe. Your heart rate's through the roof. All right. So it's that meditation thing that you're talking about. You can't really think of all the other crap that's maybe going on in your life, but you're also doing it in a group. So you're doing it with people. So you're all in it together. So you start building that kind of connection with people. But also there's a resilience piece there. And you see this with running. Okay. So I think running built my level of resilience because it was really measurable. So you could run an extra mile or a half, or you could run an extra mile a little bit faster. It's really easy to measure. And when you start doing that and you start doing things that are difficult, you start to realize that, you know, God, that wasn't too bad. So maybe if I apply that to the life situation, so something has happened financially, usually I'd have folded and I'd have gone off drinking or using. But you know what? Maybe it won't be that bad, because you start to take that learning from sport and physical activity into that.
You sort of touched on like self-worth. I'm just thinking like drinking and reliance on drink was such a big part of your life. And like, when you got sober, like, did you sort of struggle with like your identity in a way, like in terms of like you didn't really know who you were, because like you like drinking is almost all you knew, like?
I remember sitting on the Glen Shane Road outside Elton Galvin Hospital with Sarah, my wife, who was my girlfriend at that time, and I remember being in tears. I remember being distraught, and I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I love. I don't know myself, and I don't know what to do. And she said the most simplest thing to me, and she literally says, Gary, you need to just try new things. I was a no person. Somebody suggested something, I was like, no, I can't do that. That I would never do that. And she said that to me, and I thought, well, okay. So I started volunteering with a local Down syndrome trust. So never in my life did I think I would be cycling around Derry on a tandem bike with a young adult with Down syndrome on the back of it. But that's where I found myself. But by saying yes to an opportunity, I then started to love that. We went skiing. I took a group of guys to Andorra. I started building up volunteer hours, self-confidence. I then got into nursing. So that one decision opened up a pathway. And that's why I think, yes, most people who get to this, maybe the stage that I was at, who don't know themselves, have to find that out. So recovery is not just about being sober or not about not using the substance. It's about making the size of your life bigger. And that comes from trying and as opportunities. Because like addiction will make your world really small. It'll disconnect you from family and friends. It'll isolate you, And for us, it's about, yes, we want people to engage in a program, but we want to see how can we make your life bigger? How can we give opportunity to people? But definitely that identity thing, that was massive for me, And back to that thing that we said, who's going to want a near 30-year-old man that has a failed marriage, drug and alcohol history and convictions, no fingers and a broken back, And that was the reality. So I had a big piece of work to do there. Like.
So just to go back to like a timeline of events, obviously he went to Armagh, done the 3 months, and eventually sort of, things were looking up. I suppose after that, you mentioned there, touched on it about the nursing. What sort of pieced together the timeline for us there in terms of...
So, do you know what? The nursing was a really easy step and a really easy decision, and it was mental health nursing. So for me, it was about helping people who have been through emotional pain and distress, because I understood emotional pain and distress. I also had that background of addiction, and I felt that I could really use that. And I kind of feel, and I still do feel, for people who have been through something that's really difficult and traumatic, that there's almost a bit of a duty of care to help and support other people. Maybe not make the same chaotic decisions that maybe you made. So I went back to the tech in Derry and I did an access course. Loved it. Funny, I realised that when you do study, exams become a bit easier. It took me 30 odd years, right? I went back to so I did the access course and then applied for nursing in the University of Ulster, a McGee campus, which was handy. I was living there at the time. And I got on and I was delighted. I was absolutely delighted. I was like, right, this is it now. This is what is going to happen. I'm going to be a nurse and that's what I'm going to be. And that's my trajectory. And there was something happened towards the end of my first year. So I was the class rep, the year rep. I was going to Parliament to represent the university. So I was everything. I give it everything. And I had filled out an Access NI form. And I had convictions in the south that I had followed an Access NI form up in the north, and some of the convictions never showed. And I thought, they're not there. Great. And out of my ignorance, I filled out my application form for uni and did the same. And I remember I was applying to be a youth mentor, and this Access NI form came back with the other convictions on it. I was like, I don't think that they were there. So I went to the university and I told them, this is towards the end of the first year. I was just about to get married that summer. I says, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't realise that blah, blah, blah. And so I had to set a fitness day practice. So I would nearly got thrown out of nursing in my first year. And that was literally down to ignorance. So it was on my part. Now, because of the work and the reputation that I had created and what I was doing, they were very good and they were very lenient, and I was able to continue. But that is an example of consequences following you. And people sometimes think when you stop drinking and sorting yourself out that you don't have to still deal with the consequences of your actions. Still do. Hey, did nursing, got it first, loved it.
play.
Thank you.
Fair
Massive achievement. You know, I was like Mr. Nurse. I was like, how can I do all of the nursing? And then I got a job when I first qualified again. This is an example of those consequences. Fitness to practice. So my governing body, because of my background, I had a sort of special fitness to practice interview. Even though that I've been through nursing exceptionally well, still had to prove that I was okay as a person. So I find those things a little bit frustrating. Then I got a job working in the Ross Thompson in the Northern Trust. It's a psychiatric inpatient ward on a permanent contract because there was no jobs close to home at that stage. And then a job came up in Derry. Applied for it, got it, and that was me. So I was in Grangewood Hospital, which is a male acute psychiatric care. So guys who are really acutely unwell, so depression, self-harm, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all that sort of stuff. And I loved it. Work was chaotic. It was, it was a crisis. It was fast-paced. It was a good distraction, and it was really good learning. But I knew that I always wanted to work with addiction, And although I was getting that with the people that were coming in, it wasn't the sole purpose. And then I had to wait. You had to kind of serve your time as a new nurse. And I served my time. And then a job came up in the addiction service. I said, right, happy days. This is the one. And I applied for it. And I passed the interview. And I thought, this is it now. This is now where I'm supposed to be. I'm now supposed to be here forever and ever as an addiction nurse therapist because you've got lived experience. You've got, your profession. This is where it's all going to happen. I was there 2 months and I set up a page for Arc Fitness. Like, I didn't even give myself the chance. I got in there and I thought I had gone from working shifts where you were exhausted at the end of a shift and your days off, you didn't really want to do too much. We're going to an office job Monday to Friday. It was a bit more relaxed. I was like, I've got a little bit of time here. And Arc kind of started in there. So that was the timeline there. But still within those jobs, within the health service, I still had to prove that I was okay as a person. So, I still had to go to special occupational health things. I still had to prove that I was okay. And I find that really difficult because I think it's really hard for people. And I think some of the employment practices that we have in relation to people who've had previous addictions can be quite stigmatizing. But yeah, in the addiction service, loving life. And then I had always advocated for recovery. So any of my social media posts were always about my journey with recovery. This is why physical activity is good, all this sort of stuff. And I was doing my indoor climbing instructor's course. I had just finished it. I love indoor climbing. I don't know if you have it up here. You Boulder World up here.
Such a random thing.
Hi, there's something really cool about it. And I did the course, and then I was down on one of my days off, and I was up and down. I was climbing, and the instructor came over and he says, guys, look, I saw one of your posts about the recovery stuff. I said, I have a friend who's struggling. I tried to share it, but I couldn't. Did you ever think about setting up a page? And I was like, well, no, I hadn't actually. But I had had conversations in the past about wouldn't it be nice to work in that area with physical activity. And I was climbing up and down the wall. I was thinking as I was climbing, I was like, right, okay, maybe there's something in that. And I literally went home and set up Arc Fitness Facebook page. No clue about what the direction was. Literally, it was a page. I remember taking a picture of my leg just to get a black image on my phone. They write Arc Fitness on it with green letters. And that was the start of it. And the purpose at that time was to provide information. How can I provide local support information to people who were struggling? How can I share my journey with other people? And within 2 weeks, literally it exploded. And people were trying to refer people to me. And I was like, shit, this is different. Like, what are we going to do here? So I registered it on Companies House as an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation in March 2019. And the traction started to grow. I was going to try and refer people to reputable personal trainers that I knew of that weren't using gear and were kind of decent and were mental health orientated. And then I thought, why am I sending people who don't have addiction backgrounds? Why don't I become a personal trainer and then sure I can do the thing? And I became like a whirlwind personal trainer. And one thing Derry didn't need is another personal trainer, right? So the personal trainer, like per capita, is insane in Derry. But I did.
Not just in Derry and
the world.
all over.
Yeah. So I thought, right, I'm going to just do that. And I got my level 2, my level 3, and I thought, right, I'm going to just advertise for 6 people. I'm going to create a bit of a program, a bit of a structure. At that stage, it was a 6-week program. We trained twice a week. We met once a week, and we had a WhatsApp group for accountability. Didn't have a premises. Didn't know what I was going to do. So I asked the manager of a local commercial gym, Pure Gym, shameless plug. And Mag says, sure, you can use the upstairs floor of the gym on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night. They run your program. And we did. And we got 6 people within a heartbeat. Got them in, I assessed them, and we started that first program. And the nursing taught me a lot about credibility. It's really easy to think about having I know exercise is good, I know it works, I can tell you that it works, but if I can't prove it, then it's only my opinion. And it's back to that thing, opinions are like arseholes, everybody has one. So I connected with a lecturer of mine who was now in Queen's University, and we thought, well, let's do a piece of research on it. So we measured the outcomes, we measured people's mood and anxiety before. We got recovery measurement tools from King's College in London. So we took 4 measurements before, during and after. Scores were off the charts. Everybody was improving. People were now exercising twice a week. They were losing weight. They were running 5Ks. So, I mean, it started that process then. And that was, I think we started that program in the June. So it started in the March. We ran a program in the June. And I think by the September, we had got a set of keys. Somebody had gifted me some money. They were really kind. And they gifted me money to rent a small room, premises. And it was a studio, maybe about the size of here. And I thought, happy days, we've made it. We're here now, lads. This is going to be Arc Fitness forever. And you can maybe fit 8 people in training. So I started then running more programs while I was working as a nurse in the evenings. And then I started realizing, there's more to this. How can I make it a little bit more? So I started applying for funding. So small pots of funding from the National Lottery and things like that allowed me to run programs for free. So I was able to get people to come in and run some more. And then an organisation funded me that allowed me to drop a day at work. And that Friday became my ARC day. And that soon became not enough because things were getting so busy. And then I eventually went part-time at work. But I think what happened, the reason it blew up is the timing of it. It came at a time when Derry was struggling, like. Drug and alcohol use was through the roof, antisocial behaviour was through the roof, all of that stuff was there, the landscape of drug use was changing, but it was something that was different and unique. It wasn't a traditional, here's the treatment centre that you go into, and then here's the AA, NA or GA rooms that you go into. It was something that was different. It had a personality, it had somebody that had experienced it, but there was also a professional that could articulate it and just do something a bit different. And I think the transparency and the honesty is what drove it forward.
Yeah.
And then the demand. Man, we had, I think, for about a year and a half, we had about 200 people on our waiting list. That's us running through people and more people looking to come through.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you in any way, like the demand for it? Like?
Definitely did. It surprised me because I knew it would be a good thing to do. I didn't think there was going to be that many people looking to actually do it. And it was so frustrating because the hardest part with addiction is when you're ready to do something about it and you're told there's a waiting list. It's soul destroying.
Yeah.
And that's an internal struggle that I have with this all the time, not being able to provide service right there for the person. But the demand grew. I ran more programs, eventually secured some more funding, was able to employ another person who happened to be the manager in Pure Gym, who really got the work that we were doing. And we were really starting to build a good bit of traction. And then lockdown came. That was square crack. I remember first being devastated, thinking, well, that's it now. I mean, that's it. Like, what are we going to do? It's over now. And then I realised Zoom. I found Zoom. And it's back to that thing, trying new things. Traditionally, I'd have been like, I'm not going on Zoom and trying to talk to people and doing this sort of stuff. Like, everybody was uncomfortable at the start. But we went from only being able to facilitate 2 classes a week to having classes every day.
Yeah.
They've been able to have support groups every day. So our community grew over lockdown. It's interesting, I'm having this conversation with you now and I can articulate myself very well. I couldn't do it. So whenever lockdown came, I read James Smith's book.
Smith, yeah.
And it was about, if you're not good at something, do the thing until you're good at it. So I decided, what I'm going to do, it's going to be a video every day during lockdown. And I committed to doing it, and I committed to record myself every day, and they were called Thoughts of the Day, and they were all recovery orientated. And I still go back and see some of them back in the older ones. I think my beard was really black and everything back in at that stage. That's how far back we're going. But I just learned to start articulating, learning to talk, having a little bit of confidence in what I was doing, and it really stood to me. So lockdown, as much as it was challenging for our life, from an ARC point of view, we were able to do a lot more. And then we came off the back of it. I left my job, got funding, left my job completely, And we got a new premises then after lockdown, and the premises was massive. So we went from a room this size to having a 2-floored fully commercial unit with 2 gyms, therapy rooms, sports massage therapy rooms, you know, a conference room, offices, showers, toilets. So, and then it just changed the landscape of what we could do. So now we could just open this whole place up. You know, we got some funding. We've generated our own income. We're very good at fundraising. We're very good at doing commercial work. So we do a lot of work with corporates and employee assistance programs to generate our own income because we're not funded by the health service.
Yeah.
And we kitted the place out, and we did the place up really nice. And then we've now created a social space for people. So not only can they come and train and engage in programs, they can now use the gym during the day. They can come. We have free walking groups that leave there that people can avail of. You know, we have referral pathways with the PSNI and the GP federations. So it's a very different thing now. And that's it in a nutshell. There was a lot of things, do you know what I mean? But we've created something really special. And we've created an organisation that has got people with experience living all the way through it, from board level, the operational level, all the way down. You know, we employ people who have gone through our program that have got consistently, that are doing well. So we now employ them. We now educate them. We send them back to college. They go on to do counselling, any other kind of things. And we always look at using the people that have come through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's a really good thing. From a personal level, it's been a tough 5 years. Been a busy 5 years, and I can almost see little traits of the addiction in there.
Mm-hmm.
The all or the nothing, like they're giving everything to this and like giving it everything and putting this vast importance on it. So I think I'm starting to kind of maybe mature. I'll need to mature. I'm 43, like mature a little bit through it. But you know, it's been a rough ride.
I was going to ask you that, and I didn't. I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm in my head. I'm rattling through like the best way to ask this, where I don't sound like a dick, but I'm just going to be blunt. Like you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
You seem to be doing a lot, and I know you're obviously helping a lot of people. How have you progressed? Because there's some of the things you're saying which is making me think, are you busy to keep your mind off of stuff that you've been through? So
the management of ARC has been like the management of my recovery. It has been a learning experience. Okay, I haven't always got it right. I haven't always navigated the stress levels and things like that. And it's really difficult when you're invested so much in something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, this I believe that this is my purpose. Like I have no doubt that this is where my passion, my experience, my profession has all come together. So I believe that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, like, you know, finding funding, staying around is difficult. And I remember it was 11 years, so it was just over a year ago around Christmas time. And it's really funny because people don't assume that I'm somebody in recovery anymore. They just assume that life's great and you're
sort it.
And it's really refreshing then whenever somebody asks you about it, because you're like, well, actually, here's what I have to go through. But I remember that time before Christmas, and we hadn't. So this was in the end of November. I didn't know if me and Mags had a job in the February, so we hadn't secured funding at that stage. So ARC had the potential to fall apart. Yeah. So trying to navigate that. My daughter Zoe, who's the love of my life, was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder that year, uncontrolled epilepsy, 700 of seizures, amongst other things. That happened in the midst of it. I was like, how do you deal with that? I can't help it. I can't fix it as a father. I couldn't do anything about it. I had got COVID. I had a lung function of 70. I was on inhalers. I wasn't training. I wasn't eating. I was stressed out to the max. And out of the 11 years, that was the closest that I had ever got to going back to potentially the way things were before. However, the learning had been the 11 years of experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what I did is I reached out and I spoke. So I spoke to the board. I said, look, everything is on top of me now. Work is hard. Life is hard. Everything is difficult. I'm exhausted. And I said, right, so here's what we're going to do. Went back to therapy. I mean, I don't think anybody should never go to therapy. I mean, if you can go and talk to somebody about how you're feeling, brilliant. It's a great thing. And I did. Yeah. And I was able to put the tools back in place to learn the balance. Yeah. But for me, balance is an evolving thing. You know, there's times I'm good at it. And then there's times where I'm not so good at it. Yeah. And it was really interesting because I talked to people about this because they ask you, how are you getting on? Because there's a lot going on. And they're if there was other people they take the burden, then I wouldn't have a lot going on. But we don't have that resource. But I'm part of a leadership program with Ulster University at the minute. It's the 25 at 25. So they commissioned this leadership program off the back of the Good Friday Agreement. So where they take 25 young leaders, I'll say it again. I'm delighted to be on the young leadership program, right? I just happened to have graduated at a time, so the criteria is great. But we went to Boston there to an entrepreneurial thought leadership college. That's the long-winded version. We were doing this session about, how do you separate how do you separate you from the thing that you created?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously entrepreneurs and stuff can burn out really easily. And the lady who was speaking made this really simple analogy about a psychological rope. So whenever you create something and you have this really short psychological rope, you're holding on to it, it affects everything about you. So if somebody says something bad about your organization, if something happens within your organization, it has a profound impact on you.
Yeah.
But if you can learn the skill of loosening that psychological rope every now and again, and a little bit of distance from yourself, and recognize that Arc Fitness isn't Gary. Arc Fitness is Arc Fitness, and just create that bit of distance. And whenever she said that, I cried in a room full of 25 people and an instructor, because I was like people were telling this to me, and now it's almost like the penny kind of dropped. And I thought, things have to start changing. Yeah.
I'm glad you responded in the way, because I'm sitting listening to you, and obviously I'm hearing even little things that you're saying about the rock, the indoor climbing.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm thinking, are you doing this to distract yourself? Because obviously for you, the drugs and the alcohol was a way of kind of escapism. And then I'm glad you responded the way I did, because my fear was I would turn around and ask you that, and you go, no mate, it's breakdown on me.
You're just going to have me in tears. I think what does happen, and I have quite a sensory thing, sometimes I feel the world gets really loud, and I feel really uncomfortable, and I try to find ways to quieten it down. So most of that time will be isolation. I'll pull myself back or something like that. So I can see where the drugs and alcohol fit into that. I can see how distraction fit into that. So sometimes I just find the world just a little bit noisy.
Yeah.
And that can be hard sometimes. But then again, I think I've had to learn through recovery that, see, and I hate using the expression, you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? I think you have to. I think for me to develop and grow and strengthen, I still have to put myself in situations that are going to stretch me.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that. But then having somebody at home like Sarah, who's a therapist, which she's an amazing person who I could never win an argument in my life, even though she'll tell me arguments are not about winning. They're definitely about winning. Having somebody that you can talk to about some of that stuff is really helpful. And be able to draw it out of you in a really good way. But it's not every day sweetness and light. And there's days I bounce on and I love life and everything is phenomenal, and days I'm just like, could not be bothered today. And then I need to check myself whenever I'm doing that, because I have so much to be grateful for. Because I think what I have now compared to what I thought I was going to have nothing. There's times where it was so dark that I thought, there's no coming back from this. And now to have a job that I love, an organisation, a reputation, all of the good things that I have now. And we practice gratitude in ARC every single night. So every single night, I pay our team to look after the Facebook accountability group.
Mm-hmm.
Every night it's a gratitude post. What are you thankful for? And that small practice is really important.
Yeah.
And I don't always do it. And I don't always, I'm not here. I don't always practice what I preach, and that's a really vulnerable thing to say when you're in a position of responsibility for people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always get it right. I'll happily put my hands up when I'm wrong, and there's times I do get it right. But I think we have to learn and grow in this thing. And that's the learning. That's the adapting over time.
Yeah. I think understanding your story and everything has shed a lot of light on obviously the conversation in itself about addiction, and whether that be drugs or alcohol or both. And you sent us a few sort of stats and whatnot about how drug related deaths have been on the increase, how alcohol misuse has been on the increase, particularly within meals. I suppose for people listening, what are some of the harrowing or some of the stats that you're seeing that is concerning? Or
I suppose the biggest thing is the drug related deaths. So in the last 10 years there was a 98% increase, right? So we're up to 213 deaths, right? You know,
Where's that in
Northern Ireland. Aye. And I think that's really stark because, you know, an alcohol death. So dairy was the highest. It's now the second highest in the north with the highest alcohol death rate. Okay, so that's deaths directly caused by alcohol use. And I think it's really hard because those are all preventable deaths, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, alcohol use, for example. Okay, you know, the World Health Organization will tell you that there's a zero safe limit. Our government and the Public Health Agency will tell you that 14 units is the safe upper limit. Okay, you know, we abuse alcohol and it's what we've done for a long time, but we don't recognise the health implications of it. And I think there's something in that. Males tend to be quite visible in this because females tend to not come forward for help and support. There's a lot of stigma around that. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm an unfit mother, I can't handle this, and that's really difficult. But I think for me it's the drug deaths because the landscape of drug use is massively changing. So we are now seeing our streets flooded with, you know, benzodiazepines, so Valiums, blues, yellows that are all now laced with things like fentanyl and nitazines, and I'll talk about them in a second. You know, heroin is becoming more and more prevalent in here. Opiate medication, massively prevalent. And then we now have, so Lyrica, pregabalin, buds, so gabapentinoids, which was another class of drugs. So during the Troubles, off the back of the Troubles, there was really prolific prescribing of benzodiazepines, so diazepam, we settlers.
Yeah.
Me down for your anxiety, right? Which is understandable for people who really need them, but they're so highly addictive, you become dependent on them really quickly, so the strength has to increase. And then we realised we were prescribing too many benzos, so they started prescribing pregabalin for generalised anxiety disorder. So there was a documentary done in Belfast a few years ago anyway about buds, pregabalin use. And like the site, so people are going into seizures. People are dying when they stop using them, so the withdrawals are really difficult. So we're now seeing people now even making these things at home with capsule kits and making their own drugs. The nitazines are the new thing that's coming now. So obviously, like years ago, it was heroin. Heroin was the intoxicant drug. Where now you're having nitazines, which are synthetic opiates, which are hundreds of times stronger than heroin, that are now being mixed with coke. That are not haven't even touched on coke that are being mixed in benzos, and people are losing their lives, and it's happening a lot. It happens a lot in the homeless community, but we tend to only hear it in the news whenever it hits another community, which is really shameful. We're using naloxone, which is a drug they counteract the effect of opiates on a regular basis in dairy to stop people overdosing. So for me, it's the landscape of the drug use and how that has changed is the most stark thing for me. Yeah. Because that's the difference between somebody recreational using the drug one time and they die because of whatever it's mixed with.
Yeah.
Alcohol use has been a massive issue for a long time. The long-term health implications. It costs our economy £1 billion. So substance use and addiction costs us £1 billion per year. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
My issue in that as well. Imagine you spend some of that money on the addiction treatment services like ourselves. Imagine what you could save. We're in the middle of doing a piece of work with a researcher, and it's working out until we get it finalised. At the moment, it's working out for every £1 spent. For every £1 the government would give us to provide support, we save them 6. So like it makes sense.
Yeah.
So why are we not doing things like that a little bit better? But you know. But I think our culture is also changing. I think so. The negative point is, yes, you know, people are passing away through drug and alcohol use 100%. But we need to recognise that we have a culture now that's starting to shift, and that's important. I think we have the most soberest, youngest generation now, because more and more people are looking after health, fitness. You know, they're doing different things. Now, you mentioned before, people being, you know, engaged, like over in England, people doing pottery on a Friday. Brilliant. Like, whenever I grew up, there wasn't a lot of opportunity, you know. So it's nice to see that that's happening. And then dairy, for example, sits at number 5 in the socially, economically deprived areas in the UK. So you add high unemployment, you know, drug and alcohol use, deprivation, you're going to increase the risk of any kind of alcohol or drug related incidents as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's a shame. I think if we're better informed, that's really important. Like, I'm not out to scaremonger, but we see it on the ground. Coke use is ridiculous. I mean, it's so prevalent. And I remember, like, years ago, whenever I was using drugs, I maybe owed £250. Maybe at a push. That's what I owed for a bit of dope or whatever, a couple of tablets. Now we're seeing 16, 17, 18-year-olds in 8 to 10 grand's worth of debt for coke use. And you think, so how do you begin to get out of that? So now what happens is, to begin getting out of that, you start to hold drugs. Or then you start selling the drugs. Or then you start doing things to get out of your drug debt. And coke, being that expensive and being the drug that it is, it's causing so many problems.
Yeah.
And people's mental health are deteriorating. So people who were like, you know what, I'm going to have a couple of pints tonight and a bag at the weekend, they're now using during the week. They're now then using every day, and it's torturing their lives. Their relationships are falling apart. They're not coping at work. And I think there's a big problem when it comes to coke use here.
Yeah. Would you say it's becoming more like cocaine? I know back whenever we were younger and stuff, that was like the party drug you would have took at the weekend, but it seems now it's cocaine during the week, and then you're taking like the harder drugs during the weekend and stuff, or even all the time maybe. Like, why is that changed? Why are we going down that route?
So availability is one thing. So obviously coke is more available now than it ever was then. Do you know what I mean? It's cut and it's stamped on. It's available, and people were going for a pint, and they were going for a bag, or they were having a couple of keys at the weekend. And then what happens is, like, not everybody, like some people manage recreational drug use. Not everybody who uses drugs becomes addicted. That's really important.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so but a lot of people who are now starting to fall down that route start to slowly slip in, because the decision making starts to change. It starts to impact how you think. Like, you go out at the weekend and you're like, at the end of a weekend, you haven't slept, you haven't been eating, maybe you've gone through 3-4 bags of pure. You're just like, you're starting to come down. You feel shit. You can't function during the week. You start to get depressed, because, of course you do, because the chemicals in your brain start to go like, hey, what's happening here? Don't like this. And then their life becomes really difficult. They're falling out with their partners. They're thinking now their life is over because their relationship has ended because of coke or drug use. And it's starting to really impact people. Mm-hmm. But not just men. Just across the board. And I think it's really important to say that, like, coke use at the moment is like, it's like a wedding drug now. We're going to a wedding. Let's get a bag. It's so ingrained in the culture now.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Do you think that's like a common misconception? Is like, you sort of like brushed over it there in terms of like, when you think of like coke and stuff, you almost think, oh, like lads on getting a bag or whatever. Like, do you think people sort of don't really see it's like it could be an issue with women as well?
I think people need to see that it's an issue with men, with women, with professionals, with non-professionals. It's across the board. If somebody has enough money to be buying bags of pure at the weekend, then they'll buy bags. If they can't afford that, then they'll either cut the bags, or they'll buy council, or they'll put whatever they want up their nose and whatever. People will find it now because it's absolutely everywhere. It's in bars, it's in pubs, it's in homes, it's in workplaces. And that's hard too, because it starts to overspill. We have a lot of guys that would maybe nip into our services that work in Dublin during the week.
Right.
They're in the trades. They're making exceptional amounts of money. They can afford to buy the bags of gear, but I mean, they're not sleeping at all for a week. They're now not functioning at all. So it's a massive issue. I don't know how. It's very much ingrained. It's starting to become a bit like our drinking culture.
Yeah.
And I think what happens, and the danger is, whenever something becomes so acceptable, you then become if you're not a user, then that weird thing starts to happen when you're a wee bit odd.
Peer pressure nearly creeping in. Why are you not?
What do you mean? Yeah. What do you mean you're not? And I used to find that whenever I stopped drinking, people were like, "What do you mean you don't drink? What do you do?" Like, I do fucking everything else. Like, I just don't drink. I just no, because this misconception that sober people are boring. I'm just like, if you're boring, that's just unfortunate. Like, that's just God's gift to you. Like, you're just a boring person. It's not that you've been sober now. And I think there's that cultural thing too. And it's nice to hear people that are open enough to say, well, do you know what? I just don't do it. I've seen how it's impacted me. I see how it's impacted other people. It doesn't serve any purpose in my life. It makes me unproductive. It makes me sick. It makes me sad. I lose periods of time in my life, and I just don't want to do it. And I think we need to start having more advocates like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And in terms of, I suppose, just to kind of, as we begin to wrap this up, what for someone listening at the minute who say, I suppose we'll look at it in twofold. For someone listening at the minute who maybe knows someone, a family or a relative who they know themselves is, you know, in a position like what you found yourself in, and so many people do. What are the practical steps that, obviously, besides getting in touch with organisations like yourself, what are some of the...
It sounds really, really corny, right? The biggest one has been able to have a conversation, and that has to be, so having a conversation without a fight or an argument is really important. And approaching conversations with care and compassion.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what happens, we get so exacerbated and we get so frustrated with the person that it's a fight all the time.
Yeah.
And for me, it's about saying, you know, say if it's your friend or it's your partner, just say, look, I love you so much. I can see that this is happening. I can see that this is happening. Can you see that this is happening? I think when you present people with evidence, it's really difficult. I think when you tell people they are, defense mechanisms go up and you're like, oh, no, I'm not. I think whenever you do it out of care and compassion, the other thing is you can't force someone to change, but you can change how you are. So if you're in a relationship and you have a partner or a spouse that's using, then you start to need to make some changes in how you enable that. You know, you need to be able to communicate better. You need to be able to say things, well, that's not acceptable behaviour. I won't have that here. You know, but doing it in a way that's kind of at some level compassion based and understanding. You know, if somebody gets to that point where they're crying out for help, then, you know, that's where the services need to be available. You know, that needs to be that opportunity. Not everybody needs residential treatment, and that's also really important to understand. It has its place. A lot of people get sober without going into residential treatment. But I think it's the conversation. It's how you have that initial conversation. Now, I can hear every mother that's potentially listening to this going like, I've been trying to talk to my 18-year-old about this and you're telling me to be kind and compassionate. I get that it's really difficult. Okay. But you're trying to get somebody who's afraid to admit to something that's highly stigmatized in our society. They say that it's okay. And you can only do that when you feel safe and vulnerable. And that culture of safety and vulnerability is hopefully something that's going to be helpful. Now, again, not everybody who uses drugs and alcohol wants to stop. That's also a reality too, and that's really hard. And that's something where the individual needs to make their decisions around what they're prepared to have in their life. You know, but it's as I said, it's complex and it's complicated. But there's a lot of help out there, and we've got into this way of thinking in Northern Ireland, but there's no support out there. There's loads of people doing some really good things that can try and help and support people. I think it's about understanding what's available for people whenever they need it. You know, addiction doesn't need blame. You know, you don't need to blame someone. You know, as I said to you before, nobody made that active decision that it would be a great crack to be a pain in the arse professionally. Yeah. You know what I mean? But that's why we do the family support, because we feel if the person isn't ready, at least we can create an environment that supports the person to become ready. Yeah. Then that's a good thing.
And then I suppose looking at it from another side, of someone maybe listening to this who is driving to work or is, you know, coming home from work and they're thinking, I can't wait to get into a bottle of vodka, or I can't wait for something else. Like, what would you say to that person?
So this is me going back. If I can go back and I can go back to the 13, 14, 15-year-old me back then, I would be like, do you know what? It's okay to have those conversations with people. It's okay to say that, you know what, I'm struggling. Do you know what, I'm not coping with this. And also having that realization of, like, what is your relationship like? Like, having that understanding. You know, so some people who drink every day don't think that they have an issue. But having to revisit that. You know, if we think about acceptable alcohol use in our society, 14 units. So 14 units is a bottle of wine plus a glass a week over the space of 3 days. You know, a bottle of vodka is 28, so it's twice your units. So if you're drinking that 2-3 times a week, you know, at some point it's going to catch up on you. Lockdown taught us that. Lockdown taught us that people who maybe had problematic substance use, who were on furlough, who had 80% of the salary, who started drinking every day, there's now a 3-fold increase in people with substance misuse issues and mental health problems off the back of COVID, because it's really easy to become dependent. But it's about understanding that this thing happens. People find themselves in a situation, but there are so many people out there that are helpful, compassionate and empathetic, that want to provide advice, to provide support and give you a little bit of guidance without judgment. That's the big thing, without judgment. and without fear of being told that you're an addict and you're an alcoholic. Nobody, and I'll fight this. I'll fight my corner from this, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of the organisations that are out there, but I'll fight my corner because when we give these negative labels to people, it makes it really difficult to accept help.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a big piece of work to do on that. But I think if you're struggling out there and you know, and most people know that maybe what they're doing is not good, find someone that you can trust and just have the conversation, you know, in a safe environment. Maybe out for a walk or something.
Yeah.
I think walking is really important. We touched on walking. We have a running therapist who does his sessions outdoors. Because sometimes this environment's really difficult. The sitting in and looking at people can be really difficult. But see, sometimes going out for a walk and having a conversation with somebody and just telling them how difficult things are could be a game changer for you.
Yeah. And I suppose you've touched on it slightly there, but as a society in general, what are some of the things that you see that we could be more mindful of in terms of helping others around us? Because I think we're very quick as a body of people to throw labels on people and not understand that our words have weight. So
it's really interesting. I did a talk a while back, and it was about, you know, refocusing and reframing addiction. So seeing it through a very different lens. Okay, and the reality is, we don't really understand addiction, okay? We don't understand the causes of addiction. We don't understand the biology of addiction. And when we don't understand something, we usually treat it in a different way. So the lens we view it in is really it's full of fear and misunderstanding. But for me, it's about seeing people who are struggling with addiction not as, back to that thing I said, not as problematic people, but people with a genuine problem that need help and that need support. And like, I have seen people come off the back of addiction, get recovery, run marathons and triathlons, go back to school, get their kids back from care, go on to become professional therapists. And I've seen those people then go on to change other people's lives. So for me, the lens that we view people with addiction shouldn't be a lens of hopelessness and shame. It should be a lens of possibility and a lens of hope. Because when we see people as potential to do good things, then we treat them differently. And it's about treating people differently. Our values within ARC are really simple, and it's about treating people with dignity, with respect, with empathy, and with compassion. And there's a quote by St. Francis of Assisi, and, you know, whether you're spiritual or not, it's irrelevant. It's, you know, go out and preach the good news at all times, and where possible, use words, because to me that emphasizes the importance of how we treat people, how we make people feel, and how we talk to people. And if we can treat people with addiction not as the scum of the earth, not as the problems that they may present with, and actual humans that need some kind of compassion, help and support, then we can definitely go a long way.
Yeah.
You know.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
And,
it's been really good.
We, just a caveat, we will have all relevant links if people are listening to this right now and do want to reach out to someone or know someone or whatever you've been affected by what we obviously discussed in this podcast. We'll leave all the links and stuff in descriptions and yeah, do reach out. But thank you so much for coming on.
No,
been very insightful.
Thanks for having me. I'll look forward to my flight back to Derry now. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thanks, guys.